Alrighty, guys. We are talking session 2 of the Storm the Castle West Marches Take 2 campaign. So, we started off taking care of some downtime, i.e., what the players or the characters were up to since the last session. So, Urgle and Gurgle. Oh, yeah, this session we had Urgle, Gurgle, and Rickard again. Same crew as last time. Urgle and Gurgle were figuring out the secrets to this Waystone of Silthar, the Menhir of Namound, and figuring out the specifics of how it works in preventing people from attacking people within the tavern. Which is basically if you attack people in the tavern, the curse of Silthar deletes your ability to like believe in your own existence, and then you like just die basically. Okay, Rickard meanwhile was doing some researching. He was talking to some of those gnomish engineer merchants that were at Venture's Rest, and he learned about the history of the Battle of Shroom Pass, and he had learned that the dwarves had some involvement regarding that history in some way, and that might be a good place to start looking for the lost clause of the sacred schematic that he's searching for. Okay, and then they did some traveling to the latest location they have seen, a giant ruined castle by the name of Crystalback Keep. They get there, and Urgle or Gurgle, all right, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to refer to them either as Axe Gnome or Bow Gnome. But they're about to step on a tripwire trap, and right before they do that, they are warned about the trap by a kobold who introduces himself as Thrax, who is leaving this castle and his group of kobolds because he had his brother get sold into slavery by his once lord Zirnax the dragon wormling, who they also learn Zirnax's mother is the dragon responsible for ruining this castle and putting it in the state it's in now. Okay, so then they go to try and attempt a scheme. They put together this plan. Rickard is going to go up and he's going to pretend to be one of these Bandari, and he's going to pretend to be working alongside Marquide to go ahead and try to buy more slaves. And this was he was trying to seek audience with the dragon and like get into the castle. Now, once what he was actually going to do when he was in there, I don't. The plan did not seem 100% fully thought out. And beyond that, one of the unique mechanics of Storm the Castle for in the whole history of the 20 minutes that have occurred, we have achieved the first ever sin point, which is specific to the cultist class. Because Rickard worships the dealer. The dealer is the god of like contracts and fair transactions. And specifically going out of your way to be duplicitous and pretend to be someone else and try to get into a business deal under false pretenses is a very like strictly forbidden against the stricture of the dealer. Now, unfortunately, I had like 25 systems using this game and forgot how sin points because they had never come up until right now. But in the future, if he does any other like anti-dealer types of behaviors, he will roll on a table and suffer some consequence from his god. So right now, yeah, like the wizards, they have their miscast table, but otherwise they can sort of do whatever they want with their spells. Whereas clerics, they never ever have to worry about miscasting. Their spells will just always work. But if they ever go against their stricture, they will be like smitten to some extent, punished to some degree by their god. Okay, but Xernax, the wormling, saw right through this plan because Rickard has a -2 to charisma, so he's not very good at the lying schemes. Rickard gets attacked and pretty much immediately goes down. Then Axe Gnome smashes his frog bottle and summons Milo, who comes running in around later and starts fighting the dragon. And he straight up tanks a full fire breath. And at this point, about 9 other kobolds are starting to converge on their position, and it is looking extremely bad for the players. I genuinely thought that at least someone was going to die, and I thought everyone else was going to run away. But, so Axe Gnome, of that trap that Thrax had warned him of at the very beginning of the session, he took the crossbow from that trap and fired it at Xernax, and he hit, and that trapped crossbow happened to have a poison bolt loaded in it, and that dealt half of the wormling's damage because he did not save the poison. Milo was tanking for him, and then he, I believe he threw an axe, got a critical hit, and did an exact perfect amount of damage to kill Xernax. Which it was pretty crazy, pretty hype, because he got the literal exact number needed to kill Xernax. And it's moments like that does make the whole just staunch, stubborn refusal to ever fudge anything. It makes those moments very, very, very sweet when that does actually happen, and the critical hit, it just lands for perfect exact C's. That was I like that was pretty perfect. I did not think they were gonna make it out of that alive. But yeah, they just perfectly killed Xernax. Then Axe Gnome starts harvesting Xernax. He cuts off all his. He attempts to skin him, but he isn't able to recover any usable piece of hide. He does put a little patch of scales in his hat, and then he gets a bunch of claws and teeth out of the dragon that he might use for some sort of crafting thing in the future. Then they go into the. Well, okay, I guess first they get Thrax to become the new leader of the kobolds because they are all now shaken and broken from the fact that they just saw their leader get killed before them. And Thrax stands up and rises to the occasion and takes the place of the new leader of these kobolds with the support of the player characters. There's a funny little moment where I wasn't thinking about it, but Thrax, in a display of power, slathers himself with the blood of Xernax. When one of the players reminded me that well, didn't you just go out of your way to describe the poison coursing through its veins and how it was causing him? And then, fortunately, Thrax nat 20'd his poison resistance save, and did not immediately die to the dragon blood. But that would have been really funny if that did happen. They looted the whole castle. There was 1,200 gold pieces, and then they told Thrax, they gave him 150 gold pieces, told him fortify this place up, set up a bunch more traps. They also found a nearby crashed gyrocopter with a dwarvish pilot, a member specifically of the Khazad Expeditionary Air Force. They rescued the pilot. He was in a coma, but they brought him back to safety. They returned him to Venture's Rest. But Rickard did not want any of his involvement disclosed in either this whole situation or as in any part of his quest of his potentially heretical ideals regarding dwarven faith. So they decided to not like interact with the pilot beyond just rescuing him. Okay, I wanted to add a quick little addendum regarding one, the session as a whole, of like the idea with Thrax and kind of the gimmick of the whole adventure this time was going to be that you had this defector kobold who would like help you guys and like go along with you guys, and he would be able to point out where all the traps were. But if he ever died, then you wouldn't have access to that anymore, and then you would have to just like fight the rest of the encounters without knowing where any of the traps are. So that was kind of my take on trying to make a trap dungeon fun. That obviously didn't 100% pan out, but whatever. And the other thing, fortunately, Julian was paying attention during one of the previous session where there was a quick little dialogue exchange between the kobold slaves where one of them like accidentally, well, not accidentally, but to some degree like revealed and or hinted at the fact that these kobolds were on a mission and not merely just slaves. So there's potential for some more intrigue there too. And yeah, that pretty much concludes what occurred during the session. Now, this one I thought was this one was a lot of fun. I'm you know, just like every single D&D session, the start is always a little shaky, but once we got into the swing of things, this one was pretty good. Pretty high stakes. Felt a lot more dramatic than the first session at the very least. Okay, so we're going to move on to part 2 now. Some D&D just philosophy things. So in preparing for this session, I really wanted to get down and figure out the stealth rules. Now this one is bordering a little bit on mechanics, but this is mostly talking about just RPG stuff in general. Because I got like stealth is just so incredibly vital to combat. A good like round 1 stealth surprise turn is basically like casting time stop. Like everyone on your team is getting a free turn to do whatever they want. And the first turn is usually, even on top of that, like the most important turn. So like stealth is, as a factor that can affect combat, it is so incredibly vitally impactful. Like stealth as a whole probably has more of an effect on combat than like grappling, shoving, and jumping combined. But like grappling, shoving, and jumping, these all have like strict rules as like when you do them, the circumstances and everything, how you roll for them, and how they work in game. But stealth is very nebulous and vague. And I was like how does stealth work? And I like read every single blog I could find about stealth in D&D, and I watched like every single YouTube video I could find about how to run stealth in 5e and D&D, and they all just like basically, you know, like they did what you would expect them to do. They literally talk about the rules as written and say, when you roll for stealth, and if it is above all of their whoever's passive perception, all of your stealth checks are above, they are surprised. But you're like, cool, I get that. But like the question is, like, at what point do you roll for stealth? And like the question as in general that I like really got caught up on is like, okay, let's say for example you are 1,000 feet away from an orc. Okay, there's no chance the orc detects you, so you don't have to roll for stealth. But when you are trying to move silently and you're 30 feet away from an orc, well then yeah, you do have to roll for stealth because he very well could detect you there. But that means somewhere on the scale of 1,000 feet to like 30 feet, somewhere that Boolean, that binary, it switches, right? There is some number there between 30 and 1,000 that at some point you hit it, and at that point you now need to roll for stealth. And I was like how do you run this? Like what is that number? And I genuinely I almost like felt like I was on the brink of like a schizophrenic like break. I could feel myself going full like Terrence Howard because I was like I set up my table, I set up terrain, and I set up like models, and I was like, okay, so just think like logistically. So if it is upon line of sight, should that be the factor that determines when you have to roll for stealth? It's like, nah, that doesn't make sense. Because the knight behind him wearing plate mail just because he like isn't in sight, he could be moving and that doesn't trigger. So obviously it can't be line of sight. There also has to be some accounting of like sound or other means of being able to perceive or be aware of people. Like, okay, like so should it be when you have the intent of stealth, like when you declare that and then you make the roll? And it's like, well, like no, because then like like at what point do you actually like even if you do that, like obviously yes, like at some point after declaring intent of stealth, at some point that means that you're gonna have to roll, but that still doesn't answer like where along that path it you potentially become detectable. And the fact that like if that number exists, if there is an answer to that equation of like if I tried like every combination of like, okay, so what if it's like an aura, like a range you have that's calculated by your passive perception, and that determines like a literal amount of feet, and it's like, but then you could just always be 5 feet outside of that, and then like shoot a longbow inside. And I tried every single different combination of everything that could conceivably be an answer to when at what amount do you have to engage in the starting in the stealth. And I came up with just like list and list of like potential ways that you could do it, but then all the various like inconsistencies and complications that would arise and like things that just don't make sense in the real world as to like if stealth worked that way. And I just eventually learned like that this cannot be like a numeric thing. Like I don't think there is any correct answer. I don't think there is any way to run stealth realistically in a way where it can have very strict like codified mechanics attached to it. There is going to have to be some abstraction when it comes to stealth. And what I eventually landed on, what I'm going to refer to as like the 80-20 rule, but it's not that 80-20 rule. I'm just sharing the same name because it sounds nice. That is basically to say, if you are doing a like sucker punch type of stealth, what I'm going to call ganking, that is to say there is a immobile or like a static enemy, like there are orcs hanging around a campfire, and then the stealthing party is the dynamic factor, like the party is coming in and trying to attack. That should work approximately like 20% of the time. That is to say, you should not expect to achieve a surprise round when you're just trying to like bum rush an enemy. And on the other side of that, if the stealthing party is the static element, and then the dynamic party is the getting attacked, the ambush ease, then that should work like 80% of the time. That should usually work. You should usually expect that you're going to get the surprise round. And I think like the main difference, I guess, is really the opportunity cost, right? Like if you are bum rushing some enemies and just trying to get the element of surprise, there's no reason to not try to do that. Like you might as well always, like it doesn't hurt to attempt to move silently, and if it doesn't work, whatever, you were just going to get in a fight anyway. You might as well hope that maybe you get that surprise round. Whereas like ambushing, you either have to make a plan or you need information, you need to know where they're going to be going, or you just need to like sit in a place and wait for a while, all of which these things like acquiring those resources is costing you something. Um so that's yeah, my general new philosophy regarding stealth. 80/20. If you gank them, it usually shouldn't work, and if you ambush them, it usually should work. Okay. So next thing. This one's slightly, I don't know, like, okay. Well, basically the home base situation. So they now took this fort and they want to keep their gold there. They want this fort to be their new home. Which on the one hand, I very, very much so deliberately went out of my way to put a strong emphasis at the start of this campaign. You absolutely, every single player always has to be in Venture's Rest in order for you guys to go on an adventure. If your character is anywhere else, they are ineligible to be a selectable character. And again, so why did I include this? Well, because in the last campaign, it ended for a huge variety of reasons. But one of the contributing factors is the fact that eventually everyone ended up everywhere. Some people are hanging out in Arcor City, Gilmore's over here 100 miles, well, not 100, but like a bunch of miles away over at his hold. And now Humdu's over here at his monastery that he's starting to try to build or whatever. And just everyone is all over the place. And now at the start of every session, there needs to I need to either beforehand literally like prep some amount of time of some like expository Avengers Assemble scene where everyone gets together and gets on the same page just to literally be able to go on the adventure. And like during the session, we have to actively run through that whole expository Avengers Assemble, getting everyone together so that they can actually go on an adventure. And that isn't like insurmountable or anything. It's like it's like maybe like 15 minutes to prep, maybe 15 minutes to like run or something. But it's one of those factors that like once you have like 100 well, not 100, but again, once you have like any number, once you have like even like 5 of those factors of just like basic logistics to take care of before the adventure can actually start, like even in the prep phase, like if I want to prep an adventure, I'll just see like all these like roadblocks I have to figure out before I can even start working on like just the meat of the fun and the encounters and all of that stuff. And there's just like all these chores I have to take care of first. And like again, one of those is whatever, 2 of those is whatever, but what they start stacking up and building on each other, and then it eventually just makes even preparing a single adventure so annoying that I just like don't even want to bother. So I like really, really, really wanted to try hard to make sure not everyone was scattering apart and that everyone could just always be in Adventure's Rest, so I could just write the adventure and just like go. And that having been said, there's a very, very strong other side of the argument, which is that the idea of base building I think is really cool. I really like the idea that they could have this castle and they can hire masons to build the walls, and they have to either whatever variety of things that could lead to them trying to work with dwarves to help them make this place more defensible. Eventually hire a blacksmith to get like weapons or whatever to like arm their kobolds that they have defending the place now. Build a library for the scholar and have his place where he can hang out and just look at lore all day. I love the idea of like having this place that you can sink your money into and just watch it improve and grow. That is super duper cool. And on beyond that, the like absolute dream that I think would be the coolest thing in the world is if, right, like in this situation right now, this party, Urgle, Gurgle, and Rickard, are literally building a dungeon. They actively have control over a bunch of monsters and are having their monsters set up traps and creating all these defenses around this like ancient structure so that they can keep all their gold there and keep it safe. You know, they've actually just built a dungeon, and I think it would be so amazingly awesome if like I got like Luke and Joey into the campaign and they like built their own party or whatever with their own characters. And then they're like, hey, so we heard about this old castle that's all over yonder and it's like being defended by a bunch of kobolds and it's like filled with gold. We should like go over there and loot it. And I like the idea of like rival parties actively going after each other's dungeons that they've built. I just think would be like the most fun thing in the world. I like I don't know if that would lead to some Mario Party Monopoly times 1,000 hatreds of different people against each other. Yeah, I mean, like in real life. But I just think that it would be amazing. Amazing enough that I would be willing to, I like an Avengers Assemble thing that might have to occur from everyone now starting all over the place again. I think would be worth it if I were to have like a moment like that of rival parties, actually like fighting each other's dungeons. Okay, another thing. All right. So just simple thing about like the terrain base, the terrain table, yada yada. I really like how it's feeling, but okay, I just need so much more line of sight blocking terrain. The long I tried adding more terrain, but still the longbows are just going crazy, just shooting across the table. I think I really need to almost go all in on that feeling of the open air dungeon, in the sense of like it it's somewhat being broken up into like rooms and or quadrants or something, just to somewhat like slow down the everything just like coalescing into like one point of like convergence. So I think I just need to build like 10, 20. I think 24 walls. So I could break the table up into like 6 sections and then have like 4 sort of walls per section just to sort of like block line of sight even more. But I like the idea of it feeling like an open air dungeon. I think that could be really cool. All right, last thing, random encounters. I forgot about these again. I definitely want to incorporate them. I think they are going to be like vital for this very exploration based campaign. Um, so some things with random encounters, I definitely want them to literally function as a means to like eat up resources, like actually be actually add something to the game in the sense of like a resource management kind of deal. Because right now the players just have always had like half their abilities left at least by the end of every session. Like no one has come close to running out of anything yet, except for Rickard and HP by getting attacked by a dragon, I guess. Um, but yeah, I definitely I do want just a little more combat in there, and I think the sessions could use like a tiny bit more padding, especially with how these table like set piece combats have ended up going in the sense that like I kind of originally intended them to be multiple tiny combats, but they've ended up just being all one super mega combat with elevation and escalation going on. Which again, actually, I'm very happy with how that's worked because that's made these like set piece combats feel super duper awesome and cool. But again, you need the contrast. You need the tiny little combats to make the big combats feel big. So random encounters, obviously, you want to avoid there's wolves. They are sacks of HP, and you need to use your abilities on them. That having been said, sometimes you're walking through a forest and there actually are wolves because walking through the forest is dangerous because there's wolves there. So like sometimes you do just end up fighting wolves. But I don't want that to be the main thing, the main result of a random encounter. I'm thinking like I'll have like four-ish sections of types of random encounters. There'll be like the neutral random encounter of just, I guess what I would call like the environmental encounter, like something that kind of shows off the specific danger of the area you're traveling through. Like if you are going through caves or whatever, you might find monsters that live in caves, cave trolls or whatever. But stuff that's otherwise just it is what it is. It's just something that exists in that environment. Most of them, I think I kind of want to play with the reputation mechanic using random encounters. So there'll either just be like bandits that belong to a faction or whatever, and when you fight them and kill them, if any of them run away and survive, you're gonna lose reputation by just like killing members of that group. Or potentially you run into encounters that would normally be hostile, but because you happen to have a positive reputation with that group, they become like a positive encounter. Obviously, I want the random encounters to mostly be negative and to mostly like suck up resources. But yeah, I do want to sprinkle in some positive ones too. So I think there will be some sort of balance to strike between making random encounters feel like relevant to some extent, not just feel like HP bags. I don't know. I'll try throwing in a little bit of everything on the random encounters table and then see how that plays out. Okay. Part 3. The mechanics, the nitty gritty. Okay. Initiative. The popcorn initiative. It's been lackluster so far. It has been not as for as many problems that it solves with classic initiative, it just introduces that many problems with it. So I think I'm going to go full circle. I think I'm going to go all the way back around. Good old classic. Just everyone rolls for initiative. I'm going to write down a list. Then we'll just play it like that. I think my sort of idea with the popcorn initiative is that it's like quick and snappy to like figure out. But again, that does come at the cost that like once you have elements like more enemies from over here getting added into the combat and then trying to slot them in with where they should go, that gets kind of complicated with popcorn initiative. With specifically with how this type of campaign has been working out with these like giant set piece encounters. The popcorn initiative, these types of encounters where there's just constant escalation and more elements being added from various different places, it just makes more sense to do classic good old school initiative, especially because it's the kind of thing that like you'd roll once, figure out, and then since all these things are just going to be one giant mega combat anyway, it's the problem of having to roll every single time you start any combat and spend forever figuring out a list, right? You'll only have to do that once. So I think it'll actually be fine. So yeah, Popcorn Initiative's gonna get nixed. We're just gonna go back to the classic style. Encumbrance. I've actually been very, very happy with. This is one that I was very hesitant with introducing it and being very strict about tracking it. I was worried that this was going to feel like a chore and not actually add anything and just be an extra math thing for people to take care of. But it has actually led to some interesting decisions, much like the fact that, now everyone can't walk around with 48,000 gold pieces in their pocket. They actually have to think about things like, where should we store our gold and how do we defend it? Which I think is like very, very cool. And the ideas of almost like building your loadout of like, what equipment do you actually want to carry on you? Is now you cannot have, right, you could have a bandolier of 18 pistols on you, but like you're not gonna have a sleeping bag or anything else. And I do think it actually is a neat little one of those few places in D&D where you can kind of take back some of that like verisimilitude and add some of those real world actual logistics and problems that your character would be facing into this fantasy world and make everything feel a bit more gritty and grounded. So Encumbrance, I've loved what it's been doing for the tone of the game. And then just a whole bunch of features that I want to create and add. Alchemist. I gotta figure something for guy who throws splash potions and then, or something for like a type of wizard that throws splash potions and then they have weird effects. Grenadier, guy who is now this is talking about straight up guy who throws grenades type of grenadier, guy who uses literal straight up bombs and throws them at people. What is a feat I can add to make that cool? Okay, Throne Arms Master. I gotta figure out something for just if you just want to throw stuff and you want to make your character and your whole thing is he throws weapons at people. What do I add for that feat? Okay, Oracle. This one's a little more interesting, I think. I've got a little bit of an idea at least. So Cleric in this game, Cultist, is I really did not want them to be wizard but with a holy skin. I did not want them just running around shooting beams of holy light at people, shooting holy sacred flames all the time as their like default thing. I wanted them to feel more like warrior priests, where they're mostly like warrior guys, but they happen to also just do like buffs to everyone, and that's like kind of their thing. Is that they're like, kind of supporty, but not just running around shooting guided holy beams at people. I did not want like attack blessings to be like a thing. But if you wanted to build that character, like if you really wanted that to be your thing, I think that should in some way be a viable option. And I think the way that I want to do that is creating like a sort of like oracle subclass where your whole thing is that you are like blind, like you're wearing a blindfold, you straight up cannot see, but you can use you get your like sacred flame cantrip thing that like ignores the fact that you're blind, and like you can be the guy that shoots like holy fire at people. The last thing is a lore master type of feature. Like at this point, multiple people have wanted to make scholar types. So I wanted to like try to come up with a feat for that. Right now, Rickard's like starting feat I created is sort of just the knowledge domain cleric thing where you can like touch an item and like see into its past, which is cool. but it's not really like in line with all the other features that have like direct mechanical benefits. Or like, I feel like it should at least in some way have the ability to be mechanically beneficial. So like I don't know. I've been trying to think of like lore master things where like maybe you can, it gives you the ability to now make history checks, and if you succeed at history you like learn their weakness, or I don't like that in particular, but something vaguely along those lines. I want something like that. I don't know. All right, but anyway, that has been this whole session. Tune in next time for the recap of Storm the Castle, West Marches, Take 2, Session 3. Shout out again, part 2, to thanks to Vince and Julian and Gabe for this session. You know. See you next time!